Thank you, Dr. Baker. And thank you all for coming and participating in this public information session. As Dr. Baker said, we apologize for the delay in having the meeting. We were working out some technical difficulties, but we have everything set up now and ready. A couple of things about this webinar, this public webinar, is if you are connected via the Zoom webinar, there is a chat and a Q&A panel or button on the bottom of the toolbar that you could click on, and you could ask questions in the Q&A, and those questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And any questions that we are not able to answer, we will post them and record those and provide a more detailed responses to questions following this public information session. So a little bit about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting. We are based out of Ohio, but we work remotely. We have remote offices all over the country. Our company specializes in just this kind of work, so realignment, school realignment. We work with communities and build plans with the community, and we really value the transparency component of the process, where we enable the public to provide input and give us feedback from the very beginning. And that's what we've done here for Sumter. We also do work with facility studies and plans and long-range enrollment projections and things like that. But we are here focused with the Sumter School District on the realignment effort. We've worked with districts all over the country. And so some of the value that we bring to this process is having those experiences with other school districts that have gone through the exact same type of process. And then also we have experience with the technology, and our technology enables us to be able to efficiently and accurately count students and provide information, statistics, and maps and things like that in an accurate and expedient and efficient manner. And so we leverage all of this experience with every project that we work on. I am Matthew Cropper. I have more than 20 years of experience working on these types of studies. And we work mostly with public schools, but I also do some work with the Department of Justice. And I will be the one managing and facilitating the study throughout the course of this timeline. We also have James Cooper from our office, and Mr. Cooper will be doing some presenting here shortly. But James is one of our analysts who has very strong skills in GIS and mapping. And so he is the individual who's helping put all the statistics and the maps and working to make sure we have logistics and all the materials ready for all of the meetings. And so and happy to have James here as well. So let's get into it. So why are we here? And why is there a need to look at the zones and realign the zones in Sumter County? Looking back in 2011, the county and the city used to be separate school districts. But in 2011, those two school districts, the city and county, were consolidated into one school district. But before that consolidation, the city had a set of attendance boundaries and the county had their set of attendance boundaries. Once that consolidation took place, those boundaries were never have not been looked at holistically to see if there's any efficiencies that can be made, looking at both the city and the county as one school district. And so the primary objective of this study is to examine the district's attendance boundaries at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, and establish a feeder system that best meets the needs of all students in this county. So we know that that students will be moved as part of this process, and it's just important to know that no student is off the table, but we will be making adjustments as efficient as possible and move as few students as we possibly can. Our objectives of the project are to explore this, develop realignment options through a committee and community-based process, which we will be facilitating. We will be focusing on developing recommendations and options that best meet the district's realignment criteria, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. We want to address imbalances in utilizations of schools. Some have underutilization, some are a little bit higher on utilization. So we want to make sure that the schools in terms of utilization are equitable. And one of the key parts of this study is to address transportation inefficiencies of students and communities. So there are some students who live farther away from the closest school. Not to say we're always going to be able to provide put students to the closest school, but we're going to be examining that and distance the students have to travel to schools and see, can we put students closer to schools by realigning the zones while still adhering to our criteria. And this plan will be recommended to the board in March of 2022. So we have a long ways to go. We're just at the beginning of the process. We don't have any maps to share with you, options or realignment maps to share with you tonight, but we really wanted to share with you the process, the timeline, how you can participate, and things like that, some of the tools that are available right now. So our firm, Cropper GIS Consulting, was hired to develop the materials, to facilitate the study and facilitate it, and really work with the community and leverage the community's strengths and empower you with the ability to give us feedback from the beginning. We will be leveraging our expertise to help develop options and give you guidance on what is best practices and what has and what hasn't worked in other school districts. And ultimately, we will be, the consultant will be recommending a realignment plan to the school board. So let's talk about the criteria. So criteria for realignment are basically the rules to follow when you determine if a zone line should move one way or the other. So every time we look at the feasibility of moving a zone one way or the other, or moving a subdivision here or there or street, we always ask ourselves, how does it bring us closer to adherence to the realignment criteria? And these criteria are things that we've talked with the board and committee about already. And they are to balance school facility utilization. So try to make sure there's an equitable amount of seats in every building, and make sure that it's equitable in terms of how the buildings are being utilized. Account for future growth. So we may not fill up a school as high if there is an area that is expected to have a lot of future growth. So we'll be looking at that, and the committee will help, and you as members of the public will help inform us on things like that. Close proximity. So trying to assign students as close to their home as possible, and while adhering to all of the other criteria. So we will be focused on trying to get kids closest to their homes for their schools as possible, knowing that not every student will be able to do that, but that's something that we are focused on. Maximizing busing efficiencies and transportation of students. So assigning students closest to their home really ties into close proximity. And so if students are closer to their homes and there's fewer miles traveled on a bus, that equates to busing efficiency and less money spent on gas and things like that. Establish clear feeder patterns and continuity. So we'll be looking at how many, the elementary school, and how much of the elementary school progresses to the same middle school, and then from middle to high school. So in a perfect world, you'd like to have 100% of an elementary go to a middle school, and 100% of that middle school go to a high school. There are times though where you can't really fit everything in. It doesn't fit that well. And some schools may need to be split. It's from an elementary to a middle. So if you have to split a school from elementary to middle or middle to high school, it's best to make that split equitable or even. So a 50-50 split is much better than having, say, 95% of a elementary go to one middle and only 5% go to a different middle school. We have to keep in mind that, we're focused on data and statistics, but we also are mindful of that these are children that we're working with, and they're building social bonds as they work through school. And you want to have familiar faces when they go to the next level. So having a 50-50 split is more ideal than just having a very small percentage of students have to go to a different middle school where they don't have many familiar faces that they knew in the prior level. Allow for highest grade at current school to legacy enroll. So this is another provision that the board is offering to parents who may be impacted if their student is coming to the last year. So in that final year when the realignment takes place, if your student is in 5th, 8th, or 12th grade, they will have the option to stay at their school, but they do need to have their own transportation provided in order to do that. And it does not extend to siblings. And so that the legacy enrollment provision is just to further reduce the impact on students, particularly those students who are finishing out their final year at their school. This allows them to do that and not have to leave for just 1 year. Try to minimize the impact on students. So in any move, we'll be counting how many students are impacted and how many are going from here to there. And so we'll be quantifying that and trying to minimize the students that are moved if possible. Account for economic, cultural, and ethnic diversity. So we'll be looking at not only the numbers of students in schools and utilization and things like that, but we'll also be looking at the demographics of the schools and see if there's any way, as we work through the other criteria, focusing on all the other criteria, if there's a way to make schools more demographically diverse, or do something so the school can be more representative of the county or the area that it's in, then that's something that we'll be looking at as a possibility. Make every effort to establish contiguous zones. And so this is, you do have some zones in your district right now. Most of them are in the city area, but where you have one big zone for the school, and there may be a couple of small zones that maybe an apartment complex or a small subdivision that's separated from the main zone. That's usually something that we're asked to resolve and try to fix. And so it's best to have one zone per school. And that also gets students closer to the homes and ties into a lot of the other realignment criteria. Using major roads and natural boundaries whenever feasible to define the zones. So as we work to define lines and move zone lines, we'll be looking at drawing lines down major roads wherever we can, or maybe things like rivers and water bodies or railroads and things like that. Things that are logically good boundary lines for schools. And this also ties into safety and security of the student and avoids students having to cross over major roads if at all possible. So all of these criteria will be examined as we look at every option, and we'll be testing the options in adherence to these criteria. It should be noted that none of these criteria are in any priority order. That the best plan that we come up with, that we recommend to the board here, will be one that adheres to these criteria as a whole as best as possible. We can't focus only on one part of the criteria, because if you only focus on one element of the criteria, you start to deviate further away from other criteria. So the best one will be one that adheres to all of these criteria as a whole as best as possible. Let's talk about the stakeholders and people, the roles and responsibilities of the different people in your community and working on this study. The consultant, I've talked about us a lot, but we are tasked to schedule, facilitate the meetings. We are handling all the materials and communication logistics in terms of feedback that's being received, and we're preparing and making sure that the meetings are all ready and we have everything ready for the meetings that are planned, and providing supporting materials for the whole process. And then ultimately, we will be the ones that will be recommending a realignment plan to the school board as a result of all of the work that we're doing and engaging with all of these stakeholders. The realignment committee is the district's ad hoc transportation committee, and they will serve in this role as a realignment committee that includes 4 board members, district personnel from transportation offices, and the superintendent. And there are also volunteer members on the ad hoc committee, members of the public who are serving in this group, who will be giving us input and working with us through the study. So this realignment committee is the group that we're going to be meeting once a month, and we will be looking at options and working through scenarios and getting feedback from them. They will give us guidance as we continue to work to develop options. And we're really focused right now. Our focus is to develop a set of options that we can bring back to you in a couple of months and get some more feedback. So you as members of the public are very important in this process. We have a web page that's out there. It's open and up right now. It's called sumterrealignment.com. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. But that has all the materials that we are sharing with the committee and the public, and other resources are available on that web page. And there's even a feedback form that's on there right now. We've already got some comments from members of the public that had been following the process earlier on. And so that feedback form is open, and anytime if you want to go on there and give us your feedback, that information is being studied, and we'll be sharing that with the committee and the community as a whole. So as members of the public, also, in addition to providing feedback between meetings, you are always welcome to attend and watch the realignment committee meetings that are occurring. Those are publicly advertised meetings, the ad hoc committee. And then we'll also have some public information sessions for you to when we have maps, we're going to bring them back to you, and we'll have some surveys for that. And then the school board is really is assigned to assigns our tasks, the charge of the committee. And then the school board school board members are watching, and they're always active because they really want to know what's going on in all aspects of the process. But school board members are not actively involved in this, in the details, in the day-to-day operations of realignment until we get to a recommendation, start getting closer to the end. And so the school board will ultimately vote and approve a realignment plan. And everything that we're talking about from now all the way to March of next year, everything is going to be draft, and nothing is final until it is approved by the board. And so everything that we're doing, we're putting concepts together, and we'll ultimately put a recommendation together, but nothing will be final until it is approved by the board. So just keep that in mind as we continue our work and eventually start showing maps. And if your community is moved and things like that, you have the opportunity to provide input, and we will listen. Let's look at our timeline. So this timeline is on a couple of slides here. So we've been working since July, putting together materials. We've already had a series of meetings with the school board and the committee meeting, the first committee meeting in August, and those materials are available online right now. And then here we are at the public information session, you can see. We do have a series of committee meetings after this, and this is really, after this meeting, this is sort of the kickoff. And after this meeting, we will really be diving into options and looking at maps and realignment options that we'll be working through and making changes and trying to build some maps that are workable for the community and your students. You see we'll be back with the public in December, and that's our focus really from now to December is to develop options for this public information session number 2. It's trying to build a set of options that we can bring back to you, share with you in a format like this, and give you some details on the maps and things like that, areas that are being moved and considered in the options, and then get some feedback from you at that time. But we're not there yet. We don't have any maps drafted for options as of now. This is really intended to give you an idea on what's coming so that you can be ready and keep your eye on the site and be participating. So after the December public information session, we get back together with the committee 2 more times, and we come back to the public one final time in February to give you a modified set of options. And at this point, probably have 2 maps that we'll be looking at. That's usually where we're at around February. And then we'll have one final meeting in March, and then the presentation of the board will be in March of 2022. So that's the timeline for our work, and you can see we're just getting started, and we've got a long ways to go, but we've already come a long way in getting prepared for this. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to James Cooper.
Yes, how you doing, folks? I'm going to briefly go over the project approach. It's just pretty much going to kind of get into a little bit more details about the process and the timeline, and how we typically like to go about these realignment processes, and we like to break them down in 4 phases. These phases are community driven, and they typically are broken down as the first is the data collection phase. Then once we have the data collection phase, we'll go into the data analysis and assimilation. The third phase that we typically follows the data analysis phase is the option development that Matt has kind of outlined a little bit, that we're not there yet, but we will be over the coming months. And then the phase 4, which is the committee and public engagement. This is basically getting a lot of feedback and how the committee and transportation ad hoc team and the general public can give their input to help us really develop the most efficient options that abide by the criteria. So now I'm kind of going to expand on what each phase entails. So the phase 1 data collection, it started in July, and we're continuing here into early fall. And the data collection, it has a kind of time period that you see here on the screen, but the data collection period does not end. It will collect new data that's going to inform us from now all the way up until March. So the data collection really doesn't end, but this is what starts the project, and this is how we begin these processes. It started with the Sumter School District providing us official enrollment counts by grade. So they give us a good spreadsheet of all the students that are in their district, their grade, and also where they live, their addresses. We take that data and we geocode it, which is we use data that we receive from Sumter County, South Carolina GIS, the county government, which they give us address data, parcels, different subdivision boundaries, so we can understand where the neighborhoods are located throughout the county, and existing and potentially planned developments for the future, so we can kind of be informed on areas that we might expect to grow over the coming years. Once we have the data collected and it's geocoded, which that has already been on its way, we have students for the district that are geocoded, and this is all based off of 2020-21 student enrollment. We'll be talking with the committee team about potentially updating that once official 2021 to 22 enrollment data is collected. But as of right now, we're working off of 2020 to 21 student data. And once we have that data collected and assimilated, this is where we start to build the planning blocks. The planning blocks are pretty much the backbone of how we build options. Planning blocks are pretty much the puzzle pieces where we break down the district into small communities so that we can understand how moving a certain area will impact that particular community, how many students live in that area. So you see here on this slide, you see this is a planning block snippet of a map that shows the elementary school attendance zones, and you'll see PB, which stands for a planning block, and 136. That's just an ID. The top number is an ID, so it gives you an ID. Each planning block has its own unique ID, so we're very informed on not duplicating areas or unintentionally moving an area that we didn't want to. And then the bottom number is the total number of live-in students. So when you're looking at an elementary planning block map or option development map for elementary zones, the live-in, that bottom number that you see there outlined in purple, that's how many kindergarten through 5th grade students live within that area. This gives us it's a very, very concise and accurate way of us staying informed on who we're moving, where we're moving, and how many students live in a particular area. This snippet is just one of the middle school planning block areas, which those show the planning block ID on the top, PB, and a number, and then it also shows how many 6th through 8th grade students live in a particular planning block area. So each planning block label that you'll see throughout this process is always going to be based on the grade configuration. So for elementary, it will be K through 5th. For middle school, it will be 6th through 8th. And then for high school, it will be 9th through 12th. Another part of the data analysis and assimilation is developing the background report. This has been developed and shared with the committee and the general public, and you can find that on the Sumter Realignment website. But the background report its purpose is to expand the knowledge of each committee member and general public. It helps the members share a message that is consistent and accurate. So we want everybody to be on the same page and understanding where the utilization and where the enrollment is throughout the district for all students, so that we're all working off the same data and we're able to move forward and develop options on an accurate basis. The background report has a few sections to it. It kind of outlines the key objectives, which Matt went over at the beginning of this presentation. Pretty much why we're here, what we're here for. Sumter City School District and Sumter County School District consolidated into one in 2011. And there's some attendance boundaries that have yet to be manipulated since then. The background report also goes into the realignment criteria. This is something that you're that you're going to see very, very often throughout this process, because it's the rules that we want to follow, and we want everybody to follow, from the committee to the general public and all stakeholders involved, to kind of follow the same rule book so that we're all making the same exact impact. The background also outlines the, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it also outlines the stakeholders and responsibilities in case you ever want to know who's involved, what they're doing, and why. The background report give you information on that. The timeline's there, and then there's a few appendices in there that I'm gonna kind of outline here moving forward. The appendix A would be the live-attend analysis, which I'm gonna go over here the next slide. We have maps, and then we also have an appendix C, which is the enrollment and utilization tables. So this here is in a live-attend matrix. These are one of the main tables and data that we like to collect and assimilate in the beginning processes of this of any realignment job. The table has a lot of data, but it really organizes it in a very well and easy to understand format. You'll see there, I kind of outlined some boxes. Starting with the top one, you'll see that those are the zones, the attendance boundaries for middle school students along the top row. And that number below them is the total number of 6th through 8th grade students that live in that zone. Regardless of what school they attend, those are the kids, those are how many 6th through 8th grade students live in that zone. You'll also see to the right of the zones, there's an out of district number. That's any student that was geocoded to an address that happens to be outside of Sumter School District. There are many reasons why a student may attend within Sumter School District but live without, but we also want to be cognizant of that that number of students, because that number rolls into our potential estimated enrollment when it comes to option development. There's also an unmatched row that you'll see there, and you'll see as tables move forward. That unmatched number is just how many students that are in the 2020-2021 student enrollment database that we were unable to match their address in the real world. So we want to preserve that number to ensure that we're not undercounting any students that may go to a particular school. On the left row of the live-attend table, you'll see the school's names that goes straight down in that far left column. That's the school enrollment, the school enrollment for each zone, the school that's in each zone, and then the number to the right of it is the total enrollment. So if you were to take all of the numbers that are within the main box and add those up, it goes to the total enrollment. So for Alice Drive Middle School, there are 946 6th through 8th grade students that attend that school currently, based on 2020-2021 student enrollment data. The big number that we like to focus on is that middle green row, the live and attend. It goes diagonal. We like to organize it where it's nice and easy to see. That number is how many students that live within a particular zone and also attend that home school zone. So if you look at Alice Drive Middle School, you'll see that there are 946 students attend Alice Drive, and out of those 946, 768 live within Alice Drive zone as well. Alice Drive Middle School zone as well. Two other numbers that are very, very important are the live in and attend out. That's how many students, that is at the bottom row of these tables. That is how many students live in a particular zone but attend the school outside of that zone. So using Alice Drive Middle School as an example, 56 students live within Alice Drive zones but attend another middle school outside of Alice Drive Middle School. And then on the other hand, there's the live out, attend in. This is how many students live outside of a zone but attend a particular school. So sticking with the Alice Drive Middle School, out of the 946 students that attend that middle school, 181 of them live outside of Alice Drive Middle School attendance zone. These tables are very, very informative in helping us understand where students are and what the impact may be of moving a particular area that may have an abundance of live-in attendance students versus an area that may have a lot of live out and attendance students. Another part of the data analysis and assimilation is the maps. Maps are going to be common throughout this entire process. It's a very good and effective visual aspect when it comes to doing realignment jobs. Maps always show the attendance zones for all the county schools, and we have maps for elementary, middle school, and high school. This is the middle school maps currently, and there are the high school. Another part of the background report is the Liverton heat maps. Now, a map is created for each zone school within the county, and the map shows the school's attendance zone and location of the enrolled students displayed in terms of density. So it really gives you an idea of where pockets of students are located in reference to where the school is actually located and whether it's inside a zone or outside a zone. So when you see this map here, you'll see the thick black outline is each elementary school zone's boundary. You'll see a big red, in this particular one, we're using the example of Alice Drive Elementary School, and you'll see a big red glob there that's particularly surrounding Alice Drive Elementary School. That's just referencing that potentially approximately 91 through 127 students that attend Alice Drive Elementary School are within that red area. It really gives you an idea of how densely populated a particular school's population is and where that is in reference to the actual school boundary.
Thank you, James. So
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the croppermap.com/Sumter. So we have on the realignment webpage that we have, which is sumterrealignment.com. There is an online map here that you could see, and this is really something that is an interactive map that we find very useful, especially when you're talking about moving zone lines at all three levels. It can get really complex and trying to understand how you may be affected. So this is a site that you can get to from our realignment webpage, which is also available. If you go to the district's website, you'll be able to get to the realignment webpage. But I'm going to show you the online map for just a second here. So this is the online interactive map. And basically what it has, sometimes if you open it on a phone, you may not see your toolbar on the left. There's a little arrow here in the middle that you can click on. If you're on a phone, you'll have to click on that to expand it. But this works in every single, on all devices. There is a little option here. You can even click on, if you're on a phone, you can track your location and it'll show you exactly where you are in the district as it relates to the maps. But as you zoom in, you could see, well, first off, you can click the little arrow here and get access to some of the layers. And so here you see elementary schools, middle and high schools. I could turn them on and off. And then we have these planning blocks, and you see a plus sign. That usually means that there's some more options. And so this gives you the planning block data, and you can turn on and off the planning blocks. And you can also turn on labels if you wanted to. So you wanted to see how many K through fifth graders live in the planning blocks. You could turn that on, and it spins for a second, but eventually the labels do show up. And the thing with this is that as you zoom in and you start to get closer, you start to see more detail. So as I come in here, more things start to pop up on the map. And I would encourage you can use the plus and minus sign, or you can even use your mouse wheel or the pinch zoom like on your phone. But as you come in closer, you start to see things like property lines, and you could see where the parcels are and how the properties are different property lines are shaped and things like that. And this will really help you understand how the zones are shaped. And then when we start getting into options, you'll be able to go over here and you'll be able to turn on elementary option 1 current, elementary option 1 option 2, or whatever it may be. And you can start to really interface with this. And then there'll also be some utilities in here. You could type in an address and it tells you where you go currently. And there will be some utilities that we build that if you click on the map, it'll start telling you if you were or were not impacted with any particular option. But for now, the searches, and when you click on anything, it's just showing you where you're currently zoned for in the particular areas. And then the planning blocks are really a really resourceful tool, like James was talking about, to be able to go through here and start seeing. I'm trying to get to an area with a lot of planning blocks. If you go in the city, you could see they're a lot smaller, and planning blocks, the labels start to show up here. You can start seeing labels. You can also turn on the different base maps. So there's a satellite and then there's a hybrid. I like the hybrid map because it shows the road labels a lot more. But anyways, keep an eye on this interactive map. Come back here to look for options when options start to come out. And this will be a really good way for you to see and understand. We'll also be developing hard copy maps as well to help those who don't like to have the online map option. And I've talked about that. There's also some things like you can zoom to subdivision. If you live in a subdivision, we got subdivisions from the county. And so you can click on a subdivision and it'll take you to the subdivision, zoom to it. And then you can zoom out and kind of see how you look on the map and things like that. So the online map should be a very useful resource for you. The third phase that James of the four phases James is talking about is options development. And so we will be using our expertise and the data and information that we have gathered to develop a series of baseline options. So these options are we're going to share these with the committee at the second meeting, and they will be draft. They will be subject to change. I wouldn't be alarmed if you see maps. I wouldn't expect a map in the very first meeting to carry through without any changes all the way to the end. It's very common that the first round of maps, sometimes they get thrown out, sometimes they get modified, or sometimes we build new ones from scratch. And so, so just as the options start to come out, we're gonna build some for starters to really to kind of look at a comprehensive look at the district and doing an efficient type of model. And then we'll be working with you guys, members of the public and the committee, to start making changes to the maps, getting what do you like, what don't you like about the maps, and see if that can drive a change to the maps. So the options development is a critical part that will be going on starting meeting 2 all the way to the end. We'll be working through options. And the fourth phase is the committee and public engagement. And this really is the most important factor of this process, is just making sure that you as members of the public have the ability to follow what's going on. You can see what's being done, and there's nothing being done behind closed doors here. We don't have anything to hide. It's a strength to have you be in the room or being able to see the materials that we're working on and give us that feedback. It's important to note that all the feedback that you provide is very important, but just because we get feedback from a community or one individual, it may not drive a map change. We will only make changes to the maps if the feedback brings us closer to adhering to that criteria. And so it's been happened before where we'll have a neighborhood of 100 people who all want to go to this other school or wherever it may be, and that doesn't drive a map change. And sometimes we'll get one person will give us a comment that says maybe you cut a home off at the end of the street, and if you kept that home in this zone, you would have all the houses along the street. And a comment like that from one person may drive a map change, where one from 100 may not, because we're focused on those criteria. Now, if the 100 people are making comments that helps us bring closer to adherence, by all means, we're trying to do what's best and make people happy if we can, but we have to stay focused on those criteria and our objectives. Committee is going to be meeting August all the way through March, and we have the meetings will be posted online. You can look for the ad hoc meetings, and then we'll be sharing work of the committee at upcoming public information sessions. And I should say we also have the feedback forms and things like that for you to give us feedback right away if you'd like. So I've talked about it several times. It's sumterrealignment.com, and that's the online feedback form is there. So I'm going to go to here. This is sumterrealignment.com. Right now we have this big notification for people to join the webinar we're doing right now if they happen to go here to find it. But this page will give you all kinds of information. You see the timeline, you have the objectives, and then if you scroll down, you'll see other useful resources. So we've got the feedback form here, we've got the online map that I just shared with you, and we have hard copy maps that in case you'd like to see, there's a hard copy maps, and then all the materials from the different meetings will be posted here. So we already have meetings. We met with the board on the 19th. We met with the committee on the 12th, and this is our first public info session. All of these are available here, and we'll put a recording of this presentation as well on the public info session page. We have contact info here. If we do prefer that members of the public go through the online feedback form, if you can, so that we can centralize information and make sure nothing gets lost in an email. But here is our contact info. If you do need to contact us or want to reach out to us, you can do so. Myself, Matthew Cropper, or Amy Hansen with the school district are the contacts if you want to reach out. But I do encourage you to keep your comments through the general feedback form so that we can make sure that nothing gets lost and everybody can benefit from your input. So that's all we have for this presentation. So now I had mentioned at the beginning of the session that anybody who has any questions can post anything and we can answer some questions at the end of this session. If you don't have any questions now, you can always ask them in the feedback form and we'll look to address those in an FAQ document. But I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A at the moment, but I'll give you guys a chance. If anybody has any questions, if you could post them in chat or the Q&A, that would be very helpful, and we could answer them. I'll give you just a minute or two and see. Though there is one question here about when will we have online access? So the web page is live right now. So you should be able to go now to sumterrealignment.com and see all the stuff that we're sharing with you right now. The online map is there, and all those resources that we just went over are there. There is also, you can go to some of this committee meeting on August 12th, and you could see the background report that James was talking about. That was shared with the committee at their August 12th meeting. And then also there's also other information that was shared at those. So use that site to get all this information. The web page is currently live, and so everything is up and running and ready to get input from you as we work through this. Any other questions that members of the public may have? Is there anything that any member of the panel wants to have anything that they want to comment on or say anything before we adjourn? Well, with that said, I think the silence means that there is nothing else to cover. So we really appreciate, I speak on behalf of the district and also us as consultants. We appreciate you guys being here and being a part of this. And we do encourage you to follow and participate, give us your input, and we will be listening. And we really look forward to working with you on this. And so just stay tuned, and we'll be back in December with another public info session to share the maps. And please come to the committee meetings. And but if you can't make them, you'll see the materials posted online. And thanks again for your help. And you guys all have a good night.